What's the most fucked up thing someone has ever said to you? I've had leukemia a couple of times and my then wife looked at me during an argument and said these words, "I hope this cancer eats you from the inside out, and that no one is by your side when you die." I was so stunned I just turned around and went to the bedroom and went to sleep. The next morning she literally said, "I'm sorry I said those things last night, but you know how angry you get me." I left the next day and never looked back. It was 12 years of hell with her and I stuck through it to be around my kids, but at that moment I knew this had to be it or I'd never get out. Not me, but this one takes it. In high school, one of my classmates' dad died at the start of the year. All the teachers knew as he'd talked about it and been absent over it. Fast forward a few months and the kid handed in sloppy homework as the teacher called it. Then, he made a point of, in front of class, saying your dad would be embarrassed. Kid just got up, picked up his things and walked out. Pretty sure we all universally hated that teacher after that. I had a teacher, in Catholic school, that had a phone to God. One of our classmates lost her mother during the school year. A few months after she passed away, my teacher thought it would be cool to get a phone call from God and this poor girl's dead mother, who obviously wasn't on the other end of this dumb fucking fake plastic phone. It was not cool. "Is that the only reason you fucking came home?" said by my mother in front of my 8th grade counselor who had brought me home and explained to my mother that my 40-year-old stepbrother had raped me twice. I'll never forget my mother's look of disdain or the look of utter horror on my counselor's face. My grandmother told me, "We are frankly unsure if she knew he was out there or not. Officially it was a suicide." The coroner and the investigator there told my father that there were some inconsistencies. Long story short, either he hung himself and she didn't know or he went out there for dramatic attention, and when he climbed up on the chair my grandmother pushed him off. When I found him and they came running, my grandmother had this old German sword and cut him down, and we knew she had a lot of antique shit from the old country, but we hadn't seen that sword before. Just kind of fishy she had it so readily nearby. Yo, I usually keep my mouth shut on speculative internet shit, but I am 100% positive that crazy heifer sent you out there to discover the body to throw off suspicion that would have otherwise landed on her, whether or not she actually murdered him. I'm okay about it now. I'm 40, this happened in 1988. Therapy wasn't a thing remotely considered proper by my waspy lower middle class family. My parents and sister are also horrid people, but that's not what we're talking about now. I repressed it a lot, and anytime anyone talked about their stable grandparents or suicide of any kind and I would shut down, but eventually I went to therapy when I was in college for a host of reasons, including but not limited to this. I wound up doing my Sculpture 101 final about the whole experience. The assignment was your most intense memory, and so I created an installation piece where I turned a classroom into an outdoor scene and I built the woodshed out of pallets, and when you opened it a mechanism turned around a hanging sculpture of person. And though it probably gave other people a shitton of bad dreams, it was very cathartic for me. When I went to grad school for journalism I also used it for a final project, so I've managed to own the memory now and not let it affect me like it used to randomly when I was 12 or W.E. In college I studied journalism, but I had to take a required PR class. We had to keep these journals about our thoughts about news events for some reason, and I was trying to be thought-provoking, and so I wrote about this theory about why college students tend to be apathetic about the news. It had to do with the insular nature of the college campus. It was probably bullshit, but I was writing about a theory I had. The professor ripped it apart and then ended his scribbling with, "I find it hard to believe you will succeed at anything, much less journalism." I went on to write for ESPN, so he can kick rocks. When my mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, My boss at the time said she was excited that I was getting to go through this. She meant it in a beat-an obstacle that life throws at you kinda way. My mom passed away 2 years later and there was nothing exciting about watching her deteriorate and having to say goodbye. Who the fuck says that? Mom had a shitty drunk boyfriend for years when I was a kid. When they broke up he told me it was all my fault. I knew he was wrong and an asshole, but it kinda fucked with my head for a few years. Crap role model. But I kinda looked up to him and respected him for a lot of things. I saw him as an adult as I was leaving a bar with a buddy and he was entering. Remember me? I'm the kid who you blamed for your being a worthless piece of shit who couldn't maintain a relationship. He just turned around and left at the door. Fuck you Chris, you old cunt. When I was 7 my mother and stepfather were having relationship issues. After a fight in which she ended up leaving the house, my stepfather sat me down. He gave me an extremely long-winded speech about why I was a terrible bastard child. I don't remember much of it, but he ended it by saying, "It's your fault your mom and I are breaking up, you're rotten and I hate you." I don't think I'll ever forget that. My ex finished our relationship after 15 seconds. To me it was out of the blue. 5 days later my best friend told me that you should be over it by now as I'm sobbing my heart out to her. To her I should have been able to mourn and grieve my 15-year relationship in just 5 days. Turns out he was cheating on me with her. You'll never be good enough for anyone. Maybe it doesn't sound as bad as others, but it gets in my head and messed up my life. I found myself blaming myself for every little mistake, apologizing when I did nothing wrong and even trying too hard to be good enough for others. Edit. Thank you so much for the kind comments and replies. While it's nice to know I'm not the only one feeling this way, I'm also sorry that many of you guys have to deal with this feeling too. Some words really can damage us mentally and emotionally. I actually wrote a song earlier this year about not being good enough, to sort of work my way through this time. Looking forward to perform it one day when the pandemic is over. Music has always been my therapy and coping factor for many things in life, and I hope to share it with others in future. I'm feeling better slowly each day and I hope you guys will get better in time too. For context, I was very close with my grandma before she passed when I was in 5th grade. My grandpa set it up with the hospital so that when my grandma passes, the hospital would call some people to notify them of the death. One of those places was my school. My guidance counselor pulled me out of class and brought me to her office. She said to me, "You and your family are the filth of the earth. Your grandma will be in hell burning for eternity for the remarks she has made. I hope your death makes you suffer." And after that she sent me back to class crying. I didn't know this at the time, but my grandma was very public in town about how she supported gay rights. My guidance counselor was very religious. She ended up getting fired. I love your brother more than you. My own mom trying to justify why I was treated like shit and why my older brother got away with things. Edit. Context. I was around 13, I am 23 now. At the time I already had a pretty shitty relationship with my mother growing up and she basically confirmed favoritism and more love for my older half-brother, 4 years older than me. During an argument, she basically tried to convince me crying that she had to love him more than me because his biological dad left him. But it didn't hurt any less since I was already treated pretty poorly and this was just the final nail. I don't see what the big deal is. What, you're going to kick my ass because your sister puts out? From the man who sexually assaulted my sister when he was 40 and she was 13. Edit. I'm adding this for the people who hope I kicked his ass. No. Actually I didn't. There was no good outcome. My parents said that my sister decided to not press charges and I was making it worse. I don't speak to them often anymore. For this and a variety of reasons. If I'd attacked him I'd go to jail for assault. So instead it's just something I have to live with the knowledge of. But even worse, she has to live with it. She will always have the scars from it, and the only outlet I have to give her love and support to try and get through it. Went for an appointment because I had just found out my second son was on the way. Doctor couldn't find a heartbeat, but scheduled me a follow-up later in the day to try again with different, better equipment. I was upset, but I worked with other monsters, so I knew they'd make my life even more hellish if I didn't go on into work. I got to work, sat at my desk weeping, and this horrible bitch in the cubicle next to me stuck her head in and said, "Your baby's probably dead and your body's gonna reabsorb it." I hear that happens sometimes. I don't understand some people's logic. Mom taking care of her children equals wholesome, but dad taking care of his children somehow equals creepy? That's idiotic. I hope people frequently tell her how much of a dumb shit she is whenever she lowers the IQ in the room by opening her stupid gob. I mean, I guess I'm just not paranoid about men at the park since I don't have children of my own, but I keep my niece quite often, and I've never felt compelled to interrogate random dads I see at the park. My protective nature takes the form of me diligently watching my niece, instead of watching every person at the park who happens to be a male. My daughter is 4. When I take her to the park, I have to make sure that everyone sees me bring her in, and I'll call out to her on occasion so that she will run over and call me daddy after someone new arrives. I act like it's just to give her a drink or something ... but yeah. Years ago, I had very politely turned down a guy who asked me to prom back in high school, and his friends texted me all day, saying no wonder my mom killed herself, no wonder my ex cheated on me, etc. Or fucking prom dude. This guy was in the friend group, but I had never expressed any interest and barely talked to him. One of the most fucked up I can remember was my teacher to me, 14-15 to that time, after I've told her how my boyfriend, to that time 35, and his friends repeatedly raped me, and how managed a week of no contact, but how I'm scared that he'll show up at school to beat me and that I don't know what to do. You better apologize and beg him to marry you. You're still young, so let me tell you, no one wants a whore. Then on her way out of the room leaving me there, she dropped a "be a good girl and be careful that you don't get pregnant from another guy." When my husband and I first got married, 1980, he was in graduate school and got an annual stipend of $3,500, so I was the primary breadwinner. My boss knew this, although I didn't know it at the time. My boss regularly fired anyone in my position after a year. I lasted 2 years, but at the end of that time, she came in to give me my annual evaluation. She rated me outstanding across the board, but then informed me that she was not renewing my contract. Then she patted me on the head and said, "I want you to know that it's nothing personal. If I had a daughter, I'd want her to be just like you." In 5th grade I was sick and didn't go to school for 3 months. When I came back, the class was disappointed that I recovered, and for the rest of the year none of them helped me catch up with homework, tests, projects. And when I managed to pass they told me, "Too bad, we plan not to help you so you could fail 5th grade." We had a boy in 4th grade who attempted suicide. The guidance counselor came in and told the class what happened. One kid busted out laughing and said, "Is he dead?" And most of the class started laughing too. The counselor looked horrified. This boy was constantly picked on at school and his father was a total dick. Kids can be super assholes. Years back, worked at a hotel that often had movie crews and some talents staying while they filmed locally. I was like a 17-year-old girl bussing tables and pouring water. These fools, guessing producers, turn to me and say, "What about you? You probably want to be famous." I stated that I always had interest in the behind-the-camera stuff, like camera or sound work. I was always the sound person for school plays. They laughed at me and told me I was too dumb to do that. I'm guessing because I was blonde. I think they were filming Species 2. Never heard of it, but after reading the first sentence, if Google I gotta ask ... was it just some director showing off his weird fuck-ass king? Doctor, forgot his name, comes back from his Mars mission, but something is wrong. He's turning into an alien who wants to procreate with Hunan women! ! Why is it sex and not just laying eggs? Why is it specified to be a human? Just ... Why? You should have held her in. You shouldn't have pushed, said to me by my mom after I lost my daughter because I went into labor too early. The contractions couldn't be stopped and I was telling her how at first I thought I was constipated, so I kept pushing. Then my water suddenly broke. WTF. I need you to pay rent, also said by my mom after I confided in her about how I felt suicidal. Moved away shortly after that. Wasn't said to me, but I overheard it. My friend's friend had just had her mother pass away from breast cancer. She was still crying a week later in our dorm room. This was second year of college/university. It was a Saturday evening and her douchebag of a BF, we all hated him, asked her if she was over it yet so he could go drinking at local bars. When I was in my late 30s or early 40s, single, it was apparent that I wouldn't have children. Side note, being treated for depression and struggling with the meds not working, and my mom said, well, it's probably a good thing you never had children, you won't pass it along. I was devastated. I had always wanted children and her words burned into my heart. Wasn't by me, but I was there and somewhat a part of it. My stepbrother and his latest GF were over for dinner. Partway through they have a big something they want to talk about. Okay, we figure they're getting married. This would be like the third in that many years, but sure, he goes through this is the one GFS so fast I honestly stopped trying to remember their names. My stepmother is one of the nicest people you will ever meet, nearly endless patience, and always willing to go out of her way to help people. She's lent him a lot of money in the past, and I have no idea if he ever paid her back for all his failed business ideas. I only remember instead of giving her samples he made her buy them anyways. So the big announcement was the most fucked up thing I have ever heard. They gave a big, long speech about how far it is to drive to visit my stepmom, dad, and that they wouldn't be bringing their grandkids anymore unless she gives them $15,000 to buy a new car, as they didn't feel safe anymore, despite both of their current vehicles having enough room, being in good condition, and being able to make the drive just fine. If my father and I wanted to pitch in, that would be great too. My father had to leave the table. Pretty sure I just sat there at a loss for words, while my stepmom just paused and started talking about something else. My mother told me that God is kind to moms and that he was going to allow her to forget about me while I was burning in hell, so that she can better enjoy her stay in heaven. I'm not religious, and the conversation started because I burned my hand in the wood stove and she started with the whole, imagine if it was your entire body, forever, threats of hell, nonsense. My ex-boss would parade her dog around the office, despite the rules against pets on the property. One day, she approached me with her dog and said I was to avoid her office so she can finish her work, otherwise her dog will get me because he's vicious towards blacks. Then she laughed and walked away. My HR rep advised me to get an abortion when I announced my pregnancy, because it would ruin my career. What career? I was 29 years old and on the last leg of my apprenticeship as a salesperson, in a goddamn record store. Told her to fuck off, went down in hours and had the baby. Never came back from maternity leave. The chain went tits up less than 6 months later. I was told I was wasting my life when I was 14, ironically by the biggest failure I know. Joke's on him though, I overachieved out of spite and now I'm happy, an author, have close friends and never been to jail. The person who said it, miserable, has nothing and no one. He couldn't even abuse me right. let alone do anything worthwhile with his life. I was working as a cashier at a truck stop when a very pretty lady walked in wearing yoga pants. The customer at my register said, "I would love to stick it in her ass and take a piss." I, without thinking, said, "What the f*** is wrong with you?" My manager, who was next to me, also said it. Any customer within hearing distance of this guy were giving him the WTF look. Good times.